All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. Today, we are in for a treat. We are going to have an amazing episode on our hands because we have an amazing guest joining us. We've got a woman on here who is doing a lot of things right now, and she is absolutely killing them all, changing the face of education by saying some of the stuff that we probably just need to start listening to. She's a woman who lives in upstate New York, just outside of Buffalo. And just by saying that, we know that she is tough as nails. She is strong and she is determined. She is director of curriculum, assistant superintendent. She has done all the things that you can think of in education in K-12 schools, from charter to traditional public, from administration to teaching, you name it, she's doing it. She's an author of an amazing new book out right now on a topic that I got to tell you, I'm going to geek out over a little bit. We're going to talk a little about engagement, what engagement really means, what it really looks like, and how we misuse and abuse that word so often in schools. But before we do all that, we are going to talk about her as a person. Today, we've got the incredible, the wonderful, the amazing Heather Lyon joining us. Heather, thank you so much for being here.
That's a great intro. I should just have you travel with me.
You got it. Let's do it on the road.
Right. Whenever I come home, I can just have you announce me.
Just put that, just record, just have that part really loud, make that your new ringtone. And anytime somebody calls you, boom.
The amazing Heather Lyon is on the phone.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Heather, can you just introduce yourself to everybody else and tell everybody why you are so incredible and amazing?
Well, I don't know if I can tell them that, but I can tell them a little bit about me.
All right, let's start with that. And then I'll tell them again why you're so amazing.
Okay. So I am an assistant superintendent in a district in upstate New York, in the western part of the state. I tell people I am 10 minutes away from Canada, but about 6 hours away from New York City. So that gives you a sense of where I am. And I also am a mom, and so I have 3 kids. This is the one and only year where I'll have one in elementary, one in middle, and one in high. So I get to see that span from the perspective of a parent. And I do teach on the side as well. I teach at the collegiate level for aspiring administrators. I really love that work. And, I am a wife and with a loving husband. And then on the side, I'm an author. So I love that I get to say that now.
That's awesome.
So my book is called Engagement is Not a Unicorn, It's a Narwhal. So I'm looking forward to explaining that a little bit because it's a fun title.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's an amazing topic. And I know there might be some listeners right now who have listened to the show for a little while that are thinking, holy cow, Schmittou found the female version of himself. So, so for those of you that don't understand, I have 4 kids. I have one in kindergarten, one in 2nd grade, one in 4th grade, and one in high school. So I'm covering that span as well. Spent some time working as an assistant superintendent, curriculum instruction. I was an adjunct for 6 years, and now I work as a full-time professor of ed leadership, author. And that topic of engagement is something that has sparked my curiosity and my passion for a while. So I'm going to be, let's just talk shop. Can we just cut right to it? We'll come back and we'll talk about you as a person in a minute.
Yeah.
We'll just talk shop because engagement is a topic that I think we have abused, misused, and overused in schools a ton, to the point now where it's become one of those buzzwords that people just roll their eyes at. So you decided, though, to take this and say, I'm running with it. I want to try to illuminate this and shed some light on this topic and bring it to the forefront and try to explain things. So first of all, why did you decide to write this book? And then let's talk about what's in it after that.
Yeah. So my undergraduate degree is in English. I wanted to be a writer. That's what I went to school for. But I was like, how do you become a well-paid, famous author? And I realized that doesn't happen overnight. And so teaching was my backup plan. And at the time, you could, in this part of the country where I live, you could get your certification to teach and get a job in the same way like you become a waitress while you're trying to be an aspiring actress. Mm-hmm. And I realized right away that teaching was awesome. like I got to assign people to read things that I wanted to talk about.
Right,
so,
right, right.
right. And so that was a lot of fun. And I had an amazing cooperating teacher while I was student teaching who, you know, ignited in me a passion that I didn't know that I had. So very quickly, I kind of took a pivot and decided that rather than being the backup plan, that would be the thing that I would want to do. And then started to get my administrative certification. That was my new backup plan because I was like, well, I'm young and I don't have kids yet. And so if I'm going to go back to school, I want to do it now rather than later. And so I I got my certification. Long story short, I become an administrator. And while I'm an administrator, it was the same time period where things started to shift in terms of observations of teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a teacher, my principal would come into the classroom and legit, he had a checklist. And it was, you know, basically satisfactory or unsatisfactory. And you had to be a schmo to like be unsatisfactory. And I wasn't a schmo, so I was always satisfactory, but that didn't tell me very much. It wasn't motivating. It was expected. And so I was a staff developer before I became an administrator. So in between teaching and being an administrator, I was a staff developer. And somebody that I worked with pulled me aside and was like, hey, I have this training that I'm going to go to. You should come with me. And I got trained in the Danielson framework for observations. I didn't even know what I was getting trained in at the time. Who knew that that would be so important to my career? But when I became an administrator and then I got additional training in Danielson, and the person who was training me, her name was Paula Bevan, and she worked for the Danielson group. And like, I picture Paula and Charlotte like braiding each other's hair or something like that, like eating cupcakes and getting their nails done or something. And, but by any means, Paula used to emphasize how important engagement was to teaching. And that specifically in the framework, really emphasizing where engagement came up. And she would say, student engagement is really about brain sweat, that the kids should be working really hard. And I didn't always see kids working really hard. And when I would talk to teachers about whether or not their kids were engaged, I would be handed things like, oh, here are the assignments that they completed that I assigned for them to do. And since they did it and they got it correct, they were engaged. I was like, huh, that's interesting. That doesn't necessarily mean that their brains were sweating. And so, you know, you lie awake at night sometimes thinking about these things, like, because there was that dissonance between what I was hearing from what I should be looking for, and then what I was hearing in my actual practice of doing the job. And I'm really interested in theory versus practice. So I have my doctorate, and so my dissertation was the impact on leadership theory versus leadership preparation, because at the time, I felt like getting my certification was jumping through hoops. I was like, listen, the state education department wants my money. And so this is like some scheme, right? And so I was really interested in whether or not that preparation to be a leader has impact on being a leader in a formal way. So spoiler alert, it does. And so, because the job of being a teacher is fundamentally different than the job of being an administrator. And the skills that are needed in some cases are similar, like to have great interpersonal skills, to understand prioritization, to be a strong communicator. But then other things are just not at all the same. Like working with adults is very different than working with kids. And you can be great at working with kids and not great at working with adults, or vice versa. Actually, it's hard to do it vice versa. But anyway, so I ended up, this is true, and I write about this in the book. I ended up going to another school. I was visiting another school because we were doing a shared substitute recruitment, and I used the ladies' room. And in the ladies' room was a poster on engagement, and and so I actually include the poster in the book, but it is Schlechty's levels of engagement. And so Philip Schlechty, and he has 5 levels of engagement, which got me thinking. And I was looking at them, and I didn't completely agree. And so I thought it was good, but it got me thinking. So anyway, long story short, it is that trip to the bathroom at that school that really got the ball rolling in terms of what made it into the book, because that poster got me thinking. I developed a continuum of engagement, which then I turned into a matrix, which collectively I refer to as the engagement framework. And as I started talking to people about that, they were like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense to me. Is that in a book? And I was like, no, that's in my head. And they're like, you should write a book. And I was like, huh, I can write. And so I like to write. Why not? So I started putting pen to paper, or really fingers to keyboard, and it really was, I'm really engaged in engagement. So like working on this was really joyful, because I love my day job. I'm not looking to, like, I don't know, become the well-paid famous author that, you know, college Heather thought she was going to be. I'm just excited to be Heather with ideas that are worth sharing, that other people might benefit from. And that's really what I want to have happen as a result of all this, is to be able to change people's minds about how to think about engagement.
Wow. So I don't know if you can see, while you're talking, I'm just sitting here like taking feverish notes, and I've got like a notebook filled just from one question, because I have so many things I want to unpack from that, and so many little nuggets that you just dropped off. I almost don't even know where to go next, but I guess I want to go back. This is a book that was written basically because of a trip to the bathroom. It's a book that was birthed in a bathroom, which is so amazing. I mean, I'm sure you're going to have jokes to tell about that for the rest of your life. But I think it's also kind of apropos that there's a poster about engagement in the bathroom, in the restroom.
Yes.
You know, I've jokingly said before that data is a word that you would see scrawled on bathroom stalls in teachers' lounges across America, because it's one of those words. It's a new 4-letter word.
That's right.
Engagement's probably right up there as well. That if you walk into a staff meeting and you say, all right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about engagement, you get the collective eye rolls, the sighs, the huffs and puffs, because we have overused that word so much. We're looking for bells and whistles. We're looking for cartwheels and headstands. And we have all these things that we say are required and are incumbent for engagement. But what I just heard in your answer, when I simply said, tell us who you are. I mean, you went and you had so much to share because you are so engaged in this. I've jokingly said before, and I've gotten some hate mail as a result of this statement, but I'll say it again. Feel free to push back at me, that engagement in the classroom is sort of like engagement in the real world. Oftentimes we, as educators, we think that we can take words and change their construct and change the meaning. But in the real world, if you go up to somebody and ask them if they are engaged, they don't think, am I having fun? Am I skipping? Am I whatever? They think, am I on my way to get married? Has somebody proposed? Have I made a commitment to move beyond boyfriend, girlfriend stage and to move on to something bigger and more solid? And in essence, in the classroom, it's really the same thing. That's what we're asking for. We're asking for us to move beyond this surface level. Let's get to know you. Let's get to know the content, and to make a commitment that we're in this for the long haul, and we're going to go deep. We're going to go big. We're all in this together. And what the thing that I've gotten pushback from is I say, if you
Yeah, I
want to
was going
know
to ask.
if you want to know if a woman is engaged, just check out her social media, because she is telling everybody about it. She's
Yes.
showing off her ring. She's shouting it from the rooftops. That's all she talks about.
Yes.
What I just heard from you is very similar. I know that you are
Yes.
engaged in this topic because you were just boom. I mean, you are passionate about it. You are rolling with it. You are going. And I've
Yes.
said in schools, the best place to measure engagement isn't necessarily in the classroom. It's in the hallways and the lunchrooms, where you can
Yeah.
figure out if the kids are talking, if they're sharing, if they're still excited about the experience they just had. Your book about engagement, can you unpack that word for us a little bit? If you were to define engagement, or say, here's what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, how would you answer that for an educator?
So usually I start with, what do you think it is? Because that's part of the problem, is that if you ask 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Yeah, but as an administrator, you have to go observe and evaluate it, right? Just tell
Yes.
me what it is, Heather. Isn't it right?
Right.
Isn't that what some people
Right.
want?
And so, well, I think they already know, because
Oh.
there tends to be this, whatever I think it is, whoever I am, that's what it is. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's not, I would argue that it's not. So, the thing about it is that there are levels of engagement. So let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about that first. So
Okay.
let's talk about the engagement continuum. So imagine a continuum from left to right. So
Okay.
at the far left, you have highly disengaged, and at the far right, you have highly engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so the markers of that would be, at the highly disengaged level, you have non-compliance.
Okay.
The bump up from non-compliance is compliance.
Okay.
The bump up from that is interested.
Okay.
And the bump up from that is absorbed.
Okay.
So absorbed is the highest form of engagement. And that is, I'm talking about it no matter where I am. You know, you can't stop me from doing
Right.
this.
Right.
And so that is what you described just now, in terms of in the hallways, in the cafeteria, in the house. Our kids talking about what they're learning.
Does it look different based off of this? For example, the 4 kids, I'm just thinking through my own kids, the kindergarten kid versus the high school, the new high school freshman. Right now, in the world we're in, there's a lot of virtual learning taking place. My kindergarten kid, though, knows no different. I mean, he is just nonstop talking about every single thing he's doing in school. He can tell me every lesson, the name of every kid in class, even if, and he's got an amazing teacher. He's got an amazing teacher, but I can imagine, even if he had the worst teacher on the planet, the one that just is like Ferris Bueller's teacher, he would still be telling us every single detail and every single moment, because he is fully immersed in the learning. Versus my freshman, who doesn't want to talk about school at all. Nothing ever happened. It's boring. School sucks. Even though he's got teachers literally doing handstands and cartwheels in front of him, blowing things up in science class, but he's just blah. I mean, so is engagement subjective to the learner as well as the observer?
So what's going on there is, what your kindergartner, what's his name?
That is Mason.
Mason. Okay. Mason is engaged. He's not yet engaged with the learning. He's engaged with the environment.
Ooh, okay.
He's engaged with the relationships that he's forming with the people who he's with.
Okay.
And your freshman, what's his name?
That's Cameron.
Cameron is not inclined to be a teacher pleaser as a freshman.
For sure, yeah.
And so his relationships and what motivates him is different than what is happening with Cameron.
Okay.
So let's talk about that, because and that is the biggest challenge in schools, right? We are not allowing kids to kind of place their order as to what it is they want to learn off some big menu.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're serving today.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes people feel handcuffed. It makes teachers feel handcuffed because I'm not able to give choice because this is what I'm told I'm supposed to teach. And the kids aren't allowed to choose what they learn. And so you have this paradox of, well, then the best you're going to get is compliance. Just that people are going to do what they're told, and they're going to do it because they care about the possibility of a negative consequence.
Okay. Now we're going to go somewhere with this one. So be ready.
Okay.
Because this is where I bring back the fact that I spent a few years doing the same job that you do. So I'm going to ask you some hot button questions right now. So
I'll do my best.
Assistant superintendent, curriculum instruction. I think you got technology in your label somewhere as well.
I do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to focus on that first word though, curriculum. Because curriculum, I think, is another word like engagement that is completely misunderstood, that people just don't understand, right? Okay.
Yes.
Because, so when I took over in my role as assistant superintendent of curriculum, one of the first tasks I did was to present to the teachers in my district. And I asked them to define that word. I wanted them to tell me what curriculum was. And the answers range from the books that we use, to the standards that we teach, to whatever you tell me to do, to the pacing guide, to the mandates, whatever. What it boiled down to is that oftentimes people were equating curriculum to the script, to the box I was supposed to place them in because of my position. Well, at the same time, I espouse a lot of beliefs and views that you do, where I'm trying to get teacher independence and autonomy and let them to have the kids take them where they need to go, and trying to break down those boxes. So my question is, how can a curriculum director encourage engagement through the lens of do what your kids need?
So in the book, actually on page 43 and 44, I talk about the sentence says, it can be confusing to understand the differences between standards, curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
Yep.
And then I go through and I describe it, but I always use an analogy in describing this. So here we go. You ready?
Bring it. Yes, please.
Okay. So imagine we're taking a cross-country trip from New York to Los Angeles. Okay. Our destination is Los Angeles. The destination is the standards. So the kids all have to get to Los Angeles by the end of the year.
Yep.
And by the way, that's not something that you get to decide. That's something that is told to you because it's a state level decision as to what the kids learn.
So as the curriculum director, you don't get to pick that. That comes from other people, right? Okay.
That's right. That's out of my hands. Now, in order to go from New York to Los Angeles, I need to select a vehicle to get there. And that vehicle is the curriculum. That vehicle is a local decision. That I know that there are some states that statewide they have to choose, or that curriculum is chosen for them. But that's not in every state. And so at a local level, it could be as a district we decide what we're going to use. It could be by building, depending on how many buildings are in the district. Some places even allow it to be by grade level or by teacher, what curriculum they use. And by the way, I'm gonna get some hate mail, but teachers pay teachers is not curriculum. I know, right? I just went there. But by any means, curriculum is the vehicle that you use to get there, and that is a local decision.
Okay.
Now that vehicle, the standards from district to district are the same because those are determined at the state level, but the vehicle could be very different from district to district, because to get from New York to Los Angeles, some person could take a plane, somebody else could take a train, somebody else could take a car, you could take a combination of those, but that is not a decision, or that is a decision that is a locally controlled decision. And you need to keep in mind, is that curriculum guaranteed? This is Marzano's work. Is it guaranteed, and is it viable? guaranteed meaning every kid has access to it, and viable meaning that it's going to work. So if you choose the car, is the car going to break down along the road? And or is the car, is the plane's autopilot set to like Spokane, Washington instead of Los Angeles? That's a problem. If it's not aligned to the destination. I also add it needs to be contextual, contextually appropriate for where you're using it. So in other words, I was in a district once where they had adopted the math modules for teaching math at the middle school level, but the modules were designed to be taught within an hour. That was the design. And they only had 40-minute periods. So let's not be surprised that the kids don't make it to Los Angeles. They only made it to Minneapolis because, that vehicle wasn't designed they weren't utilizing the vehicle correctly. So the next question, or the next piece of this is instruction. Instruction is the route you take the vehicle on in order to get to that destination. And so that's the path. That path is determined by whoever is driving that vehicle, the teacher, and whoever is in that vehicle, the student. And so that might mean that first period, even though you have the same teacher teaching first period and fifth period, the kids in those classes are different. So you may need to take that curriculum, that vehicle, you may need to take it down a different path because the kids in that class are not the same kids. Or that last year you went on a path, elementary teacher, but this year that path needs to be a little bit different because the kids are different, even though the vehicle is still the same. And it's really important for people to wrap their heads around how much autonomy teachers have with their instruction. That is the area of their greatest autonomy, because no two teachers are the same. So you can hand that same vehicle to an entire district worth of teachers, but it's going to look different because even though I'm the female version of you, we're not the same.
It's true.
And so my experiences that I'm bringing are different. And also, even if we were identical twins who had the exact same experiences, the kids in our class are different. So we need to be mindful of the passengers. And finally, in this analogy, there's the GPS. And the GPS is the assessment. It lets us know where are you in relation to where you're supposed to be. And some of those measures are things that come from on high, like a state assessment. But most of them, by far, are locally decided. And by locally, I mean the teacher decides, because homework is an assessment, and exit and entry ticket is an assessment. How are you is an assessment. It's a diagnostic to understand where you are so that I can meet you where you are and decide, maybe I need to make an adjustment to my path today.
So good. I'm going to play up this analogy a little bit more because I think it's working. It's a good analogy. Along the route, when you've got the chosen vehicle, who determines the speed limit and how fast you're supposed to go and how quickly you're supposed to get there? You said the standards, you have to get to LA by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Aside from getting there by the end of the year, is it okay if one teacher decides to make pit stops, one teacher decides to drive a little slower and enjoy the scenery, and another teacher says, let's just get there and then we'll vacation and party at the end? How fast is that part of the responsibility of curriculum directors, the state admin, or do teachers have that luxury as well?
I think teachers should have a large voice in that, only because they're the people driving the vehicle. They're the people who know the passengers. And so I want them to be able to speed up or even take the scenic route if they realize that the kids in their classroom are interested or ready, or,
Yes.
There's listen. This year I've had to work with my teachers in preparation for designing a school year that they've never designed before, right? So their old curriculum maps are not going to be the thing that's going to be helpful for them, because the contact time that they have with kids is compromised. because the platforms for instruction are new, all kinds of stuff, right? So we've had conversations about what's the need to know, what's the nice to know, and what's the let it go.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of times where we want to hang on to the things that we like or that we say the kids like, but it may not be the thing that is getting us closer to Los Angeles all the time.
Oh,
And it's really hard to let that go. I mean, who doesn't want to take the detour to go see grandma or whatever along the route? And if you have time for that, go for it. But I think that when there are, because listen, I work in what in some states is a ridiculously small district because we only have 2,000 students in our district.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, I worked in a district where we had, over 6,000 students. And even that in a lot of places is small. But I find that the bigger the organization is, the more top down you're getting messages because they want to implement pacing guides and things like that. And they do that as a desire to have consistency
Mm-hmm.
because they can't be in every place to see how things are going. They can't meet with every teacher and say, what do you think? And so it's, here's a small committee of people that got together. Some of your peers were on it, maybe not from your building, but nevertheless,
Mm-hmm.
go. And I think that our desire to create safety nets often creates a feeling of handcuffs. And those two feelings are very different. I am more than happy to have a safety net because I feel like, oh, you're there to support me in case I fall.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily love handcuffs because that's you don't trust me to do what I'm hired to do.
Yeah, I like that. So in essence, your job, you're like the mechanic. You make sure the car is working.
Yeah.
You do the safety checks ahead of time. You make sure there's air in the tires, that there's good, clean gas in the engine, spark plugs are clean, and the car can go. And then you trust the teacher to determine whether or not they're playing the alphabet game in the car, whether or not they're counting 99 bottles
Yes.
of beer, whether or not they're popping on the DVD player and saying, kids, just watch a movie as I drive. But you're
Right.
trusting them to get the kids where they need to go and to be the facilitator of whatever happens within that vehicle. And your
Yes.
job is just to protect it and make sure that car stays on the rails and on the road. Is that?
Yes, and you're reminding me of what I have shared with people, which is that if people want high level of autonomy, they have to be willing to have high levels of accountability.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if you want me to ease up on the work that I'm supposed to do and give you greater level of choice and voice, then we need to agree on what are those additional GPS mile markers along the way to know that what you said you were going to do actually achieve the results that we both agreed that you were going to achieve.
Sometimes you need to turn on Life 360 and track every move. And sometimes you say, check in when you cross the state line, right? Yeah.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah.
So within your book and the context of your expertise, you really then focus in on the stuff that's happening inside the car. Is that where engagement takes place? It's
yes.
So this idea that it's not a unicorn, that it's a narwhal.
Yes.
Break that down for us and explain what that really means.
Okay. So everybody knows what a unicorn is. I can go up to a 3-year-old child and they will know what a unicorn is. Not everybody knows what a narwhal is. And by the way, for those people listening who don't know what a narwhal is a real animal. They really do exist. It looks like a unicorn and a dolphin had a baby. And so it's a whale that has a horn on it. And they've become much more popular now, even if people don't know the name of them. They might call it a unicorn whale or something. But they are very real, even though not everybody knows about them. And even though people, when they see it, they don't know that it's a real thing. So the idea of engagement not being a unicorn, but being a narwhal is the idea that even though we use the word, we overuse the word engagement, so everybody knows the word, they don't necessarily know what it means. And so they think about it in ways that are mythical, that either it is the lowest level possible of, every kid doing exactly what they're told to do, which you would not want that for your children, would you? Just, blindly doing whatever they're told to do, and only in
let's differentiate. At home, 99% of the time, yes. In school, no. I want my kids, when they get old, to understand that when they hear no, it's not a limit on what they do. When they're still in my house, I want them to understand that no means no. So let's differentiate that. Yeah, I want my kids, though, I want them to be differentiated. I want the teacher to reach them individually and allow them to go and grow as they need. I get where you're going, yes. Yeah.
I would even argue that what you're talking about, though, are things that, because there are things even in adult lives that we do compliantly.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like if I gave you the choice, would you like to pay your taxes or not like to pay your taxes? What do you think?
I'm not paying.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are lots of things that we have blind compliance to. We do it. We would prefer not to, but we do it, and we just accept that it's something that you do. Like, don't put metal in the microwave.
Right.
My background is not science. I could not tell you why I'm not supposed to put metal in the microwave, but for sure I don't do it. And if left to my own devices, I would like not to have to worry about that. Honestly, I would like to just microwave whatever I want to. But by any means, so if engagement as a unicorn is either really low level stuff, like just do what you're told. Every kid does what they're told, or it's ridiculous stuff that like would never happen, like kids applauding at the end of a lesson. Oh my gosh, teacher, thank you so much for this amazing educational experience we had today.
Yeah.
But so then what is engagement then, if we're talking about engagement at the highest level? So let me pause and go back to the continuum that I was describing a couple minutes ago, because I want to point out that non-compliance and compliance are both forms of disengagement. Compliance, while it is definitely worthy of celebration, if we're talking about, we once had a previously non-compliant person who is now doing what they're supposed to do, like celebrate the heck out of that.
Right.
You should feel really good about it. You can praise that person for doing it. Love the way you finally cleaned your room today. Maybe with a little less sarcasm than I just said it. It is only when we get to interested that we have entered the realm of engagement. And so interested means that I am willing to do this work, but I need a consequence in order to do it. Consequence meaning positive or negative. It's a neutral term, right? So think carrots and sticks, okay? So that's one. So we need an extrinsic. The other piece that you may need, even if you don't need a carrot or a stick, you need a relationship with the person who is assigning you that task. So interested people care about the reward extrinsic that they get for, or the consequence that they get for doing it, or the relationship that they have, and they also are willing to do the task. So whereas absorbed is above and beyond that. So absorbed means I don't need an extrinsic person or thing for doing this task because my reward is intrinsic. And this task is so enjoyable for me, engaging for me, that you actually have to tell me to stop doing it. Now, I want to pause here and just say that I do not think that we should be aiming for absorbed engagement in every classroom for every student every day. Human beings are not wired for that. But it is perfectly reasonable to expect that we get all kids to the interested level in all classes every day. And so, go ahead.
No, first of all, I'm fully engaged in everything you're saying right now, even though I'm not clapping and I'm not cheering and I'm not necessarily laughing and doing cartwheels. I'm fully engaged because my mind is just racing right now. And it's interesting to me. My biggest takeaway so far in all that you've said, it's going to sound relatively simple, but I think it's a profound thing that you're unpacking for us. That engagement is not this binary phenomenon of got it, don't got it. You're engaged
That's
or you're
right.
not engaged. And I think in schools as a whole, we've taken too many things and tried to make them binary. We've tried to make teachers effective or not effective. Students are proficient or not proficient. Did you in class thumbs up or thumbs down? Like everything is black and white and got it, don't got it. And or at least that's how we try to compartmentalize it and frame it. But none of it really is. All learning is a process. We're somewhere in that journey. We're somewhere in that process of getting it and getting it more. When you think you've got it, you're farther away from getting it than you ever thought you were. There's always more that you can get. And I'm thinking right now, just through the lens of administrators, how often do administrators go into classrooms and simply say, were the kids engaged?
Yes.
No. Got it? Don't got it. But it's not that way at all. It's what evidence of engagement did you see? And where were they in this continuum and in this spectrum? How can we elicit more engagement? Or how do we tap into the engagement or the passion of Johnny or Susie? It's a continuum. It's a spectrum. And we have to embrace that so that we can grow that. Because it's a growth mindset, basically.
Yes. Here you go. You ready for it?
Yeah, bring it.
Okay. So first of all, before you can even, because when we think about non-compliant, the first question we need to ask ourselves is the task that I am asking of this student within their zone of proximal development? Think about Goldilocks. What's important when you, and I write about this in the book, but Goldilocks, she tries Mama Bear's porridge, it's too cold. Papa Bear's is too hot. And then she goes to Baby Bear's and it's just right. And she eats the whole bowl. What we don't focus on, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, what we don't focus on is the fact that she wanted porridge the whole time. She wasn't refusing porridge. She was refusing porridge that wasn't right for her.
Oh, that's good.
Right?
That's good.
Because when we tell that story, we don't focus on the fact that she wanted it the whole time.
Yeah.
And so kids, we say, oh, if they're not doing it, it's because they don't want it. That's not true. It's because it's not right for them.
They don't want it how you served it up, right? Yeah.
That's right. It's too hot or too cold for them. They need it just right. And so the first question you need to ask if you're noticing noncompliance is this something that they should be able to do? And so once you understand that, then let's say you have somebody you're in a classroom and you're observing kids, right? And so if you are just visually looking for engagement, you are probably just looking to see, are the kids doing what they're supposed to be doing? And it's a checkbox, yes or no, right? I personally done it. I've gone into classrooms and tallied up how many kids are, they're supposed to be reading. They have their heads down. And so I counted that as they're reading.
Right.
Well, I don't know if they're reading or not. I can't tell by looking. So honestly, when you look at kids I love watching kids do group work because they're into it, right? When like their butts are in the air. And so you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And so, heads down, butts up, like they are up and, into it. But what happens when the bell rings?
Yeah.
Because that's a measure of whether or not those kids, that's how you can tell the difference between interested and absorbed.
Right.
Because when the bell rings, if kids go, they were only at the interested level. I don't care how into it they were during that class. If they go, they were only interested, because absorbed means I have to more or less tell you to stop. And we all have been there where we're with kids and you're like, guys, you got to go. You got to go. You got to wrap this up. And they're like, wait.
Right.
The other thing that I'm going to share is that is the idea of how do people react to video games? And I don't care how old you are. You could be, 4 or 5 and doing like, abcmouse.com or something like that. Or you could be what my kids would call a boomer. They call me a boomer. I'm like, no, that's your grandparents. Like, but anyway, and you're doing Candy Crush or whatever the latest thing is, right? And time goes by differently when you're doing that. But more importantly, and here's the thing, ready for it? You're going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody plays a video game that is so easy that they never fail. You move on to something else because you expect to be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And when you play video games, they actually operate within the zone of proximal development because they give you a little bit of knowledge to start so that you can be successful. And while you're doing it, you're learning skill sets that will be helpful in the next level for entry level to the next level, but not enough for exit level on the next level. And so, but kids, human beings, time and again, will persist over and over and over again at a video game, failure after start, after failure after start. And you have to tell them, put the game away, turn the lights out, it's time for bed, no more screen time, whatever the case may be. And yet in school, we shy away from that. Mm-hmm. We say, no. We want you to be successful the very first time you do it. And by the way, if you're not, you will not have the opportunity to go back and try again. So that's why, in part, why you have to be successful the first time you do it. Go. And then we wonder why they're discouraged or disengaged, right? Well, I have to be perfect when I do this. And I may or may not be, but then the goal becomes not the learning. The goal becomes the grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so we have a lot of kids. So for each level on the continuum in the book, I described 3 different ways that can manifest. So for absorption, it manifests as either you're a novice. In other words, here's this new thing that I want to try out. And so I can't get enough of wanting to spend time doing it because it's new. So that's the first date phase, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you become an enthusiast. And at that point, it goes from I was dabbling in this into this is a part of my identity. I'm not just somebody who runs, I'm a runner. I'm not just somebody who writes, I'm an author. I'm not just somebody who, whatever. Mm-hmm. The third type, and this is on the far end of the continuum, is an addict. And so somebody who becomes addicted to whatever that thing is that they're absorbed in. And so, in fact, they're so absorbed that they disregard everything else or, enough of the other parts of their life that it becomes problematic. Well, I would say that in schools, the things that we have kids addicted to are grades.
Mm-hmm.
We feed and fuel that beast and we create it. No kid goes into school, in kindergarten, having had experienced grades before, unless they were in pre-K or something and we started them prematurely with the notion of grading. We create that. So we can undo that too.
So good. And the people that are listening right now are thinking, holy crap, Schmitto is just keeping his mouth shut right now because you're saying all the things that need to be said right now. I feel like I'm just sitting here listening saying, Heather, just keep going. Just roll. I mean, you're opening up Pandora's box and you're sealing it shut, never to be opened again because you're uncovering so much stuff that just needs to be blown up and exposed. And I'm excited that you are intriguing people right now because I can only imagine they're going to listen to this and they're going to go straight to Amazon and say, oh my gosh, she opened that up. There better be an answer in that book that explains what to do about this. It is one thing to point out a lot of these things that we're all well aware of. But oftentimes in our classrooms and our schools, we say, yeah, I know, but that's the way the system was set up. That's just the way it's always been. That's the way that I'm told it has to be. But there are
Right.
solutions to this, right? You say
Yes.
teachers need to have autonomy. They need to be able to show that they can get from point A to point B, which means
Yep.
teachers also have the power to fix things. They're all part of the same system that we're saying has some issues within it. What are some of those
Yes.
small takeaways that teachers can do then to find the narwhals, to uncover the magic
Great.
in the classrooms and within their kids?
So, so thanks for that great lead, because honestly, the book is divided into 4 sections. The first section, it talks about the engagement framework, but then it goes into 3 sections: what, so what, and now what, with the markers of the continuum. So what does it mean to be non-compliant is in the first section. So what does it mean to be non-compliant, compliant, interested, absorbed? Then the next section is so what? Why does it matter? And then the third section is how do you get somebody from non-compliant to compliant, from compliant to interested, from interested to absorbed. And so the now what section is like, I don't know, over 100 pages of strategies in the book. And they're divided into those kind of groupings. So let's say you're working with some people who are non-compliant. What are you supposed to do? I will tell you that the easiest strategy that I think people should be utilizing today is to not allow kids to raise their hands. So I think when we allow kids to raise their hands, what we're saying is that learning is voluntary, and it shouldn't be. It should be expected of all the kids. And so I love equity sticks. And honestly, with my aspiring administrators that I was teaching at the collegiate level, I had equity sticks because I was like, listen, I just want you guys to all be ready, but I know that some of you are going to be inclined to visually and actively participate, and some people are going to be they're more observers of the learning. And I'm going to help us all get out of our comfort zone, because obviously you can tell that I'm an active participant. So like, I'd be the person like, I have something to contribute. But so it forces me to as one of these people to, take my turn. For the people who are less like me, who I really respect and admire, who they sit on the sidelines and they are the oracles who they have the thing to contribute, and you're like, oh my God, I wish that they don't speak often, but when they do, everybody listens because they don't speak often. But it forces those people to contribute as well. So that is the easiest, cheapest thing that can increase engagement, because at the very least, you're shifting from non-compliance to compliance, because you are now getting kids to contribute who may not have otherwise. And by the way, I just want to say a disclaimer in terms of equity sticks. Ask the question, then pull the stick. If you pull the stick and then ask the question, then only one kid needs to pay attention.
That's good.
But
I love that.
There, but you shared with me earlier that, this podcast was a passion project for you.
Yeah. And
there are absolutely ways to create passion projects for kids that I think, even given this unique learning environment that we all have to contend with this year, hopefully it's just this year, but we should still be looking for ways to do things like that. Mm-hmm. But one more thing. We struggle because we say, well, Johnny likes dinosaurs and Sally likes soccer, and, and I teach physics. Neither of these things are necessarily applicable to what I teach. And I think just because Johnny likes soccer and Sally likes I think I messed that up. Johnny likes dinosaurs and Sally likes soccer. Sally might also be interested in things that are larger conceptually.
Mm-hmm.
And or how can we help engage them even if they may not have a lot of interest in the topic that we're studying? We should help students better understand learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's get them engaged in how to learn, how to advocate for their needs. Choice and voice are the best ways to go from compliance to interested. Because if that destination is the constant, then how we get there is the variable. And so that means that the standard says that the kids have to write an argumentative essay or write in an argumentative style. Well, that doesn't mean that it has to be the essay. And it doesn't mean that it has to be that every student answers the same prompt. And so I give a lot of suggestions on how to do that in the book.
Oh, that's so good. We'll just talk about this podcast, for example. Not every person that is going to get something out of this podcast is going to listen to it. Some people are going to watch it. Some people are going to hear a couple of nuggets of this and say, I'm going to go read the book that basically explains all of this. As adult learners, we recognize that we learn through a bunch of different mediums, a bunch of different styles, a bunch of different ways. And if we know that about us as big kids, why can't we trickle this down to the kids we serve? I love every single thing that you are saying right now. It is so good and so spot on. So
if the adults want autonomy, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Go ahead.
No. You run. You go. If the adults want autonomy.
Right. Then let's not be surprised that the kids do too. And if the adults want autonomy, and they're given it, they should be given it to give the kids it too.
That's right.
Because we're all human beings.
That's right. Good enough for us. It's good enough for them. That's absolutely it. Mm-hmm. So spot on. And I feel like right now I could go back and I could just read the 3 pages of notes that I have for the audience and leave them with all these little nuggets and these quotes that I wrote down. And selfishly, that's why I do this podcast. I tell people all the time, I do this podcast because it allows me to have these conversations with people that I know are going to inspire me and fire me up and give me so much to learn. And I don't have to just cold call people and send them a little DM and say, hey, do you want to talk, and creep them out? I can, if I say, hey, do you want to talk, and we'll broadcast it to the world for some reason, people are like, oh yeah, let's do it. But I learn so much from these conversations and these talks. And especially on topics where I feel like, oh, I already know a lot about this. You took like this topic of engagement and put this whole new spin on it and made me think about things in a way that I never have before, which I so appreciate. And I'm sure so many of our listeners are looking at this in a brand new way as well. But I'm wondering if you had to synthesize this down and say, here's the thing I want people to remember, and the thing that I want them to latch onto from all of this. I mean, obviously we want them to go get the whole book and read every single page.
Please.
And highlight the snot out of it. Tweet every single sentence. I think she would be okay if you violated copyright if you tweeted the entire book line by line. I'm just saying. But if you had to synthesize it down and say, but here's the thing of all of the things that I've mentioned, pretend right now that you're up on a stage and you've got 15,000 educators listening to this talk, and you've got the microphone in your hand right now, and you've got the opportunity to have the audience listen to your every word right before you drop that mic and walk off the stage to a raucous applause. What is it that you want them to hear and to resonate on?
I want them to know that engagement is a continuum of behaviors that they have influence over for themselves and for the people who they interact with. And that that engagement probably looks more active than what they may have already been thinking about. But it also is attainable in ways that once I start to talk about it, it can get a little bit scary. But I promise that when they read the book and they see what I'm really talking about and the suggestions that are in there, that it's doable. And kids may not applaud them for it, but kids may be applauding themselves now for the work that they're doing. And I think that that's an even better form of recognition for our work, that the kids enjoy who they become as learners.
So stinking good. So good. Now, Heather, I'm going to have all your contact info in the show notes for those overachievers that are going to listen to this, watch this, and then want to read about it. But for those people that do want to just hear you tell them how to connect with you,
Yeah.
first of all, tell us where they can find you, and then tell us where they can find your book.
Okay, great. So it's easy to find me because my Twitter handle, my Instagram feed, and my website are all the same. It's Lyons Letters, LYONSLETTERS, lyonsletters.com, or at Lyons Letters on Twitter and Instagram. And if you go to my website, you'll be able to get a hold of me because those links are there. And there are lots of in the book, I have QR codes and things like that to watch, videos or whatever that I might mention that are on YouTube and whatnot. But they're all linked on my website. Any diagrams and things like that in the book are also on the website, and they're free. So please, I want to change the conversation. So that takes a mass of people to do. So I want to give the masses whatever they need to do that. And then to buy the book, you can go to barnesandnoble.com. You can go to amazon.com, or if you want to buy in bulk, you can go to edumatch.com and order the book there.
Awesome. The EduMatch family just continues to grow and keeps bringing in amazing people. And you are definitely one of them. So, Heather, thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a crazy busy schedule to continue on the conversation, to enlighten people, to give people that little nudge to start the conversation, perhaps in their school, in their district, or even in their own head. So that people everywhere, whether you are a parent, a teacher, an administrator, start to realize that you truly do have the power. The power starts with the conversation. The power starts with a small action. You're in control of everything that happens in that car from where you are to LA, or from LA somewhere else. Take control of it, drive safely, and get your kids where they need to go. So Heather, thank you so much for all that you're doing, for being you, and being here today.
Thank you, Dave.